Now that you understand the basics of call and put options, we're going to hammer home the concepts of intrinsic and extrinsic value and how they relate to each option. As you've learned in the previous sections, intrinsic value refers to real value at expiration. Extrinsic value is extra value associated with a contract based on time left to expiration or the market's assumption of where the stock might go. This unknown factor is called implied volatility, which is just the implied potential move of a stock's price, derived from actual option prices and how expensive or cheap they are relatively speaking. Ultimately, the more time to expiration, the more extrinsic value there will be in an option. The more fear there is that a stock will have a huge move soon, the more potential extrinsic value the option could have. When it comes down to it, option premium is really just made up of intrinsic and extrinsic value. If we have a call option that is below the stock price, it has real or intrinsic value because it offers the owner the right to buy 100 shares at a price below the stock price. If we have a put option that is above the stock price, it has real or intrinsic value because it offers the owner the right to sell 100 shares at a price above the stock price. If we have the total option premium and want to figure out what the extrinsic value is, we can just subtract the intrinsic value from the premium price. As long as an option has time to expiration, there is more than likely extrinsic value in the option, even if it doesn't have any real value yet. So what do we call options that don't have intrinsic value yet? What do we call options that are teetering on the stock price? How about options that have real value now, but we still have 30 days until expiration? We put context around these situations with a few terms: in the money, out of the money, and at the money. In the money, out of the money, and at the money are terms used to describe the option's contract strike price in comparison to the current price of the stock. In the money options have real intrinsic value at expiration, and out of the money options only have extrinsic value. At the money options are the strikes that are closest to the current stock price and are very close to having intrinsic value. It's important to note that in the money does not reflect profitability. It just means the option has intrinsic value. Out of the money options can be profitable prior to expiration, even if they never go in the money. For example, if I sell an at the money put for $2 and the stock price goes up 10 points, my put is now very far out of the money and it is likely worth less than what I sold it for. If I buy that put back for less than $2, the difference would be profit. For a put option, the option is in the money if the strike price is above the stock price. If I have a long put at the strike price of 60 and the stock price is currently trading at 50, that option is in the money because the put allows me to sell 100 shares at $60 rather than $50. Since I know how to calculate intrinsic and extrinsic value, I can see how much extrinsic value is left in that option. If the option is trading for $12.50, I know that $2.50 is extrinsic value since the option is $10 in the money. If I have a short put at $40, that put option would be out of the money. With the stock at $50, the $40 put would not have intrinsic value at expiration. The put owner can sell shares at a higher price in the market than the put contract offers. Whatever the $40 strike put is trading for is purely extrinsic value as it is not in the money, but there is time until expiration and an assumption that the stock may move from the current price. As long as the stock is above $40 at expiration, I would keep the premium I collected up front as profit. For a call option, the option is in the money if the strike price is below the stock price. If I have a long call at the strike price of $35 and the stock is currently trading at $50 per share, that option is in the money because the call allows me to buy 100 shares at $35 rather than $50. If the option is trading for $15.50, I know that 50 cents is extrinsic value since the option is $15 in the money. If I have a short call at 60, the option would be out of the money. With the stock at $50, the 60 call would not have intrinsic value at expiration. The call owner can buy shares at a lower price in the market than the call contract offers. Whatever the $60 strike call is trading for is purely extrinsic value as it is not in the money, but there is time until expiration and an assumption that the stock may move from the current price. As long as the stock price is below $60 at expiration, I would keep the premium up front as profit. As you may see by now, the holder of a long option generally benefits when the option goes in the money, while the seller of an option generally benefits when the option stays out of the money. At Tastylive, we like to take advantage of the extrinsic value that is offered in the option marketplace. The more extrinsic value we collect, the more we can reduce our cost basis on shares that we may own or are trying to own in the future. Therefore, when we're selling options, we're generally selling at the money or out of the money options. If we're creating a debit strategy with a long option, we try to reduce our extrinsic value as much as possible on the long option. This usually means buying the option in the money and selling an option against it to completely mitigate the extrinsic value decay we would have realized. We try to capitalize on extrinsic value when selling options and minimize extrinsic value when buying options, as extrinsic value will always be $0 at expiration. Let's review. The total premium of an option's price is simply extrinsic plus intrinsic value. If we want to calculate extrinsic value, we can subtract the intrinsic value, if any, from the option's price. When it comes to credit or short strategies, capturing extrinsic value is a good thing. When it comes to debit or long strategies, minimizing extrinsic value can be a good thing. Options offer us flexibility from an expiration standpoint, but they offer the most flexibility from a strike price standpoint. Every product that has an option market will offer different strike prices. Some may be 5 points wide, some may be 1 point wide, and some even have half-point wide strikes. This flexibility really opens up the door for strategy customization and, most importantly, where we choose to become long or short stock. At the end of the day, option strategies are only as complicated as we want them to be, so they can simply be used as a tool to become long or short stock at a better price for some investors. Let's take a look at this example here. Assume XYZ is trading at $125 per share, and we're looking at the November expiration. As you can see, there are plenty of strike prices to choose from. Maybe I want to become long 100 shares if XYZ drops to 110, so I sell a put. Maybe I want to be short 100 shares if it rallies to 140, so I sell a call. Or maybe I think it will trade between 110 and 140 through November, so I sell both at the same time to create a range of profitability. Maybe I want to obtain long share exposure for a fraction of the price of the stock, so I buy a 120 call. Maybe I want to obtain short share exposure and define my risk, so I buy a put at 130. Any way you slice it, option strategies offer endless flexibility because we can choose our strikes rather than being forced to trade the market price of the stock. Let's take a look at another example here. XYZ is now trading at $50 per share, and I decide I want to sell a put at the 40 strike for $3 because I think the stock will stay above 40, but I wouldn't mind owning the shares at the 40 strike if it sells off. This $3 in premium is all extrinsic value since the put has no real value to the owner yet. They can sell their 100 shares at the market price of 50, which is better than my strike of 40. Since I'm selling the 40 strike put for $3, I can use that to reduce my cost basis from the strike price. Regardless of what happens with the stock price, my cost basis is $3,700 here. If the stock stays above 40, I keep my $300 in premium as profit at expiration. If it drops below 40, I would own 100 shares of stock with a cost basis of $3,700 at expiration since I collected $300 to sell the put option. Not too shabby when you compare it to buying shares of stock at $50, which would have resulted in a pretty big loss from the sell-off. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's say I thought XYZ was going down, so I sold a 60 strike call for $2 instead. This call has no use to the owner yet, so all of this premium is extrinsic value as well. They can buy 100 shares at the market price of 50 instead of using the call to buy shares at 60. As long as the stock stays below 60, I would keep this $200 premium as profit at expiration. If it goes above 60, I would be short shares of stock at the 60 strike at expiration. Just like the put side, I'm collecting premium here, which I can use to improve my cost basis. I would really have a short basis of $6,200 instead of $6,000 because of my $200 premium. Again, not too bad of a cost basis compared to shorting shares at 50, which would have resulted in a pretty big loss after a rally. We could even deploy a combination of these two strategies and take risk on both sides by selling the put and the call. This would create a range of profitability around the stock price. My total credit would have been $5 in this example, which I could then use to become long shares at a cost basis of $3,500 or short shares at a short basis of $6,500 if it came to that. We're all about flexibility at Tastylive. We could sell a put to become long shares at a lower price or sell a call to become short shares at a higher price. The closer I get to the stock price on the put or call side, the more extrinsic value I'd collect from selling an option. This is because of the increasing uncertainty of whether that option will expire with intrinsic value or not. The further away I get from the stock price, the less extrinsic value I'll receive from selling the option, because it seems a lot more certain that the option will expire worthless, even though there's always the possibility that it won't. Even options that already have intrinsic value have extrinsic value as well, like the 130 put and the 120 call we talked about earlier. This is one reason we stay away from buying naked options, because even though they offer great leverage, a good chunk of the cost to own the option is extrinsic value, which will decay to $0 at expiration. Just like expirations, we follow the herd when it comes to strike prices as well. If there's a huge difference in activity between two strikes that are near each other, we may consider choosing the more active strike to ensure we have a better chance at getting in and out of the trade at a fair price. In general, we create strategies that we're comfortable with while keeping these concepts in mind and make sure they line up with our opinion on the stock's price and where it may or may not go. Let's review. At the end of the day, strike prices give us the flexibility to choose where we want to become long or short stock instead of being forced to trade the market price. We can get long 100 shares of stock at a lower price by selling a put, or get short 100 shares of stock at a higher price by selling a call. Strike prices that are closer to the stock price will have more extrinsic value because of the increasing uncertainty of whether that option will have intrinsic value or not at expiration. Strike prices offer endless flexibility, which is just another reason why options are so interesting. In the next couple of sections, you'll learn a lot more about liquidity and why it's so important to retail investors like yourself. The bid-ask spread is where we'll start, and this is really just the spread of prices where you can buy or sell an option or stock at. When you go to the grocery store, there's usually a static price for things you purchase. An apple, for example, might cost $1 to purchase. There's no wiggle room, as that is the price the store is willing to sell you the apple for. Now imagine a world where instead of a static price, you have two people in the store that are arguing over what the value of the apple should be. But here's the kicker. You already bought all the apples in the store. You may or may not have an obsession with apples. You are the market maker here, which is how an option market works. As the market maker, you facilitate buying and selling and make your money off the bid-ask spread. One person notices the apple shortage and is willing to sell you theirs for 80 cents, and someone else is willing to buy some from you for $1.20. This disagreement on a fair price creates a price spread between 80 cents and $1.20 for you. You could buy apples for 80 cents and sell them for $1.20 and make a pretty decent return off the transaction. Of course, as the market maker, you want to sell the apples to the customer willing to buy them for $1.20 rather than 80 cents. This sets the ask price at $1.20. Naturally, I want to sell these apples to the highest bidder, so the ask price is known as the natural price for the person buying. The other party willing to sell the apples to me at 80 cents sets the bid price. Naturally, I want to buy the apples from them at the lower price than what I can sell them for. Now that you have an understanding of how the market maker operates, we need to switch to the option and stock market where we are the buyers and sellers working with the market maker. When buying an option or stock, the ask price will be my natural price since I'm buying from a market maker. When selling an option or stock, the bid price will be my natural price since I'm selling to the market maker. In most cases, I can immediately buy the option or shares at the ask price because that's the worst price for me and best price for the market maker. If I want to immediately sell an option or shares, I can do so on the bid price, as that is the worst price for me and the best price for the market maker. When buying an option or stock, I pay a debit to do so. The ask is my natural price, so in the case of buying a call option that has a bid-ask spread of $1.40 to $1.45, I would pay $1.45 if I wanted to get filled immediately. The bid-ask spread is 5 cents wide, which is pretty good. There isn't too much slippage here, which just means the prices are pretty close together. If I bought the option on the ask and sold on the bid, I'd only lose 5 cents. If the bid-ask spread was much wider, this would be bad for me as I'd have a lot of slippage from my initial purchase price. When selling an option or stock, I receive a credit. The bid is my natural price, so in the case of selling a put spread that has a bid-ask spread of $3.14 to $3.17, I would receive $3.14 if I wanted to get filled immediately. The bid-ask spread is 3 cents wide here, which is even better than our previous example. If I sold the option on the bid and bought it back on the ask, I'd only lose 3 cents. If the bid-ask spread was much wider, this would be bad for me as I'd have a lot of slippage from my initial sales price. At Tastylive, we believe that liquidity is king. Trading in a fair market and being able to get in and out of trades easily is very important. As you can see, a narrow bid-ask spread is super important because it gives me a fair market to trade in. I want as little slippage as possible so that in the worst case scenario where I buy on the ask and sell on the bid, or sell on the bid and buy on the ask, I don't lose too much in the transaction. The wider the bid-ask spread is, the less I know about the fair market price. I could be filled anywhere between the 50-cent and 80-cent spread in this example, but the 50-cent, 51-cent spread is much more clear. This 1 penny wide spread is as narrow as it gets in the option and stock market, and a lot of ETFs get close to this. Let's review. The bid-ask spread is really just the difference in price between what the market maker is willing to sell something to me for and buy something from me for. The wider the bid-ask spread, the harder it will be for me to get a fair price. This also indicates a lack of activity, so it might be harder for me to get in and out of trades. Our best case scenario is a penny-wide market, and we stay away from very wide bid-ask spreads for all the negative aspects they may have.